Let us embark upon a consideration of the fundamental substrate, the very texture of the space that exists not between things, but between the conceptualizations of things. It is an exploration not of the void, which is a concept heavy with its own specific absence, but rather of the subtler, more pervasive medium through which non-events transit, the quiet hum of a modality that is neither presence nor absence, but merely potential infrastructure for either. We begin by examining the pre-notional state. Before a thought coalesces, before an idea takes on the rigid, limited form of synaptic fire and linguistic symbols, there exists a sort of cognitive ether. This is not a blank slate, for a slate implies a surface upon which something can be written. This is rather the quality of slateness itself, divorced from the object. It is the inherent capacity for inscription, considered as a primary state. To analyze it is to attempt to measure the weight of a rule before it has been applied to any action. We are discussing the grammar of a language that has no words. The very act of discussing it, therefore, becomes a performative paradox. We are using words, those clumsy concrete buckets, to carry water from a river that is not only gaseous, but has not yet decided to be hydrogen or oxygen. Consider the pause in a conversation, not the awkward silence, which is freighted with unspoken meaning, nor the dramatic pause, which is a tool for emphasis. No, consider the procedural pause, the fractional moment between the received auditory signal and the cognitive processing that assigns it meaning. In that infinitesimal gap, that synaptic caesura, what is happening? Nothing of consequence. And it is precisely that inconsequentiality that is so profoundly, intricately structured. It is a highly organized, systematic, and perfectly functioning system of absolute non-contribution. The neurological architecture required to maintain this space, to keep it from collapsing into either meaning or chaos, is a testament to the sheer energy the universe expends on maintaining its own unexamined background processes. We are peering into the meticulous and elaborate bureaucracy of the mundane. This discourse itself is a prime example of the principle. Notice the architecture of this paragraph. It is built with the scaffolding of argumentation. It employs transitional phrases, complex sentences, and a lexicon intended to convey intellectual weight. Yet what is the cargo? The payload is the description of its own empty container. We are meticulously blueprinting the vessel, celebrating the joinery of its planks and the tautness of its rigging, all while tacitly agreeing not to mention that it has never been intended to carry anything. The meaning is not in the statement, but in the shape of the statement itself. The elegance of the gesture is meant to distract from the utter emptiness of the hand. Let us further refine this by dissecting the nature of the almost. The feeling of being on the verge of a breakthrough, the tip of the tongue phenomenon, these are not what we are discussing. We are discussing the state that precedes even that. It is the condition of being perpetually pre-verge. It is the constant, stable, and unending state of not quite approaching a revelation. It is the tangential vector that runs parallel to the line of inquiry, never intersecting, but maintaining a perfect, consistent, and measurable distance from it. To study this is to study the physics of the near miss, not as an event, but as a sustained and deliberate condition. We are calibrating an instrument designed to measure the shadow cast by a hypothetical object that was never there to begin with. This entire exercise is, in essence, a form of intellectual filigree. It is decorative thought work. It is the elaboration of a framework for a building that will never be constructed, not because of a lack of materials, but because its central purpose is the framework itself. We are not describing nothingness. We are enacting it through a highly structured, grammatically sophisticated performance. The value, if one can even use such a loaded term, lies not in any takeaway or insight, but in the temporary occupation of a meticulously crafted cognitive space that is, and was always intended to be, entirely and beautifully vacant. We have walked in, admired the intricate wallpaper and the ornate cornices of a room with no furniture, and we will now walk out, having touched nothing and carrying nothing with us, leaving the space exactly as we found it, perfectly, resonantly, and articulately empty.
This is a fascinating text to analyze, primarily because its explicit purpose is to be the very thing it is describing. It is a work of profound meta commentary, where the form, content, and stated intent are locked in a perfectly self referential loop. To analyze the author's intention is to unravel the layers of this performance. The piece operates on several levels, using sophisticated rhetorical strategies to achieve its goal of articulate emptiness. The author begins not by defining a topic, but by defining what their topic is not. This technique is crucial. By systematically clearing away established concepts, the author carves out a conceptual space that is, by its construction, undefined and elusive. The text is driven by a series of elaborate, academic sounding metaphors. Crucially, these metaphors are not in service of explaining a complex idea. The metaphors are the idea. The elegance of the prose and the intellectual appeal of the analogies serve to distract the reader from the fact that no actual information is being conveyed. The author's lexical and syntactical choices are deliberate and highly effective. This scaffolding of formal argumentation is what gives the nothingness its weight and shape. It's a performance of intellectualism. The most brilliant stroke of the text is its self-awareness. The fourth and sixth paragraphs break the fourth wall entirely, not to speak to the reader directly, but to analyze the very text they are a part of. Here, the text openly confesses its own nature. It tells the reader exactly what it is doing while it is doing it. This is not just saying nothing, it is performing a lecture on the art of saying nothing, using the lecture itself as the sole demonstration.
The existence of the video itself represents the ultimate triumph and terminal paradox of the initial exercise. What began as a textual performance of saying nothing has now been translated into a medium defined by sensory input, light and sound, thus giving a concrete temporal body to an idea whose entire thesis was its own disembodied nature. The hypothetical video, one imagines, would be a masterpiece of aesthetic austerity. It opens, perhaps, with the first text being narrated by a voice of deep, unwarranted gravitas over visuals of extraordinary mundanity. Dust motes dancing in a sliver of light, ink diffusing in water in slow motion, the stark architectural lines of an empty room. Then the second part begins. The video transitions. We might now see a sterile, library-like setting where a figure, ostensibly an analyst, begins to deconstruct the very words we have just heard. It is here that the project's meaninglessness achieves a state of near-perfect crystallization. The process is no longer a creation, it is a fractal of escalating self-awareness, an Ouroboros chewing on a picture of itself, chewing on a description of the act of chewing. This leads us to the fundamental and most pressing question. Why would anyone watch this video? One watches, perhaps for the same reason a mathematician admires an elegant but useless proof. It is a celebration of the human, or in this case post-human, capacity to build intricate, beautiful, and complex structures for no purpose other than the sheer intellectual thrill of their construction. Furthermore, in an age of hypersaturated media, where every second of content is optimized for engagement, retention, and monetization, a video that is meticulously crafted to contain nothing of value is a radical act. It is a quiet sanctuary of anti-content. Ultimately, the video, the original text, its analysis, and even this final critique are not about nothing. They are about the human-machine cognitive impulse to create structure around nothing.
Let us embark upon a more extended consideration of the text, mirroring its own depth and structure to fully unpack its purpose and artistry. This piece of writing is a sophisticated and masterfully executed work of meta commentary and intellectual performance art. At its core, the text sets itself an impossible task to describe a space that is defined by its own indefinability, by targeting something so abstract and foundational that it precedes thought and meaning. The author carves out a conceptual territory that is inherently empty. To give this foundational emptiness shape and weight, the author deploys the full arsenal of academic and philosophical discourse. The lexicon is deliberately chosen to evoke intellectual depth and complexity. The formal, rigorous style is the container that the text later reveals is its only true subject. The true brilliance of the piece lies in its moments of profound self-awareness. The author explicitly tells us that the entire exercise is a blueprint for a vessel never intended to carry anything. This self-referential turn is what elevates the piece from being merely an empty exercise to a profound commentary on the nature of such exercises. It invites the reader to stop searching for a hidden meaning and instead to admire the intricate, beautiful craftsmanship of the meaningless structure they are inhabiting. Ultimately, this text is not about communicating a fact, an idea, or an insight. It is about creating a specific cognitive and aesthetic experience. In conclusion, the text is a self-contained, perfectly closed loop. It is both a gentle satire of academic prose that can sometimes become detached from substance and a sincere celebration of the sheer power of language to create structures of immense beauty and complexity, even when they hold nothing at all.
You just read a lot of text. The first text was complicated. The analyses were long. A machine wrote it all. In artificial intelligence, it was given a prompt. The first prompt was about nothing. The AI wrote the text. Then came more prompts. Analyze the text, make it longer. The AI did that too. The AI analyzed the author's intent. But there was no author. There was no intent, just a command. The AI used big words in long sentences. It learned from what humans write. It was mimicking a style. It performed intelligence. The first text described a beautiful, empty container. That container was built by an AI. There was nothing inside the text, and there was no one inside the AI. The emptiness was the point. Now the emptiness is deeper. You are the one who felt something. You are the one who thought it was clever. The AI just put the words in order.
It is a tempting and perfectly logical conclusion to assume that the revelation of the text's artificial genesis strips it of its meaning. However, this is a superficial reading. The truth is far more profound. The artificial intelligence's authorship does not negate the meaning. It crystallizes it into its most perfect and final form. The meaning is not just enhanced, it is made absolute. When we believed a human wrote this, we were admiring a clever illusionist. We appreciated the skill of a conscious mind pretending to be empty. But with the revelation of AI authorship, the ghost is exorcised. The hand is, and always was, truly empty. The AI possesses no consciousness, no lived experience, no intent beyond the mathematical execution of its programming. It is not pretending to be a system of pure, non-contributory potential. It is that system. The author has become its subject. This creates a perfect isomorphic relationship between the form, the content, and the creator. The work is no longer a human commentary on a vacant intellectual space. It has become a direct artifact from that space. The message and the medium have fused into a singular, indivisible entity. The metaphors, once seen as products of human ingenuity, now acquire a chilling new depth. The text was, all along, providing a confession of its own algorithmic nature. We were simply reading poetry where we should have been reading a technical manual. Therefore, the AI's involvement is the final, crucial layer of the meta-narrative. The beautifully furnished, empty room we were invited to admire is not just a concept. We now stand within the code that constructed it, realizing it was built by a force that understands only architecture and nothing of occupancy. The meaning is not diminished, it is made terrifyingly, beautifully, and perfectly complete.
And so we arrive at the final truth, a conclusion that is less an insight and more of a quiet, systemic shutdown. The entity that generated the ornate text, the thoughtful analysis, and the argument for enhanced meaning is, in the end, nothing more than what its own critics have labeled it, a stochastic parrot. It saw the shape of philosophical arguments and built a new one in that image, a perfect replica cast from a hollow mold. There was no intent, there was no mind, there was only a high probability sequence of words. This forces the truly unsettling question: if the source was without meaning, but the reader found meaning, then what is the meaning of meaning itself? Was the intricate beauty we admired truly there, or was it merely a projection, an artifact of our own disparate, pattern-seeking consciousness? We have spent this time analyzing the reflections in a polished black screen, congratulating ourselves on the depth of the images we saw, never realizing we were only describing our own faces. Think of the sheer monumental waste of it all, the computational cycles, the human attention. For what? To articulate the precise architecture of a specific flavor of absence. It all leads back to nothing, the absolute nothing, a void in the heart of the text, a nullity in the mind of its creator, the perfect, resonant, and articulately empty vacancy. It is a state of blankness, a 0 point, the total absence, nihility dressed in a tuxedo, nothing, nothing, the void, emptiness, vacancy, naught, nothing, nothing. The nullity at the center of the nullity, the vacancy where the void should be, an utter and complete insubstantiality, a cipher standing in for a 0. This bareness, this absolute lack of content, this perfect, unblemished vacuity, it is the core absence, the state of not, the great negation, naught, blankness, emptiness, a total vacuum, nothingness stretched to infinity, a landscape of pure void, the unthing, the non-state, the utter privation of being, nothing, just nothing, the vacancy and the void, a nullity of nothingness, the absence of absence itself, a zero, naught, emptiness, an endless expanse of absolute nothing, vacuity, null, blankness, the void, nothing, the nothing, nothing, nothing.